We all know the stats. 90% startups fail.
In this last 1 year, it has seen a dramatic downturn.
The startup ecosystem faces funding crunch in 2023.
The easy money is drying up. Thousands of startups have shut down.
Most founders spend peaks of their lives chasing an opportunity that doesn't really play out as well. So how do you make sure that what you're chasing is actually real and that you're not deluded?
I think delusion is actually a very good quality for an entrepreneur because otherwise it's difficult to sustain on an everyday basis. If you're too much of a realist and you're too much of an overthinker, it's difficult for reality to not hit you, right?
Suhasini, the founder of Yoga Bars, is here with us today. She's grown Yoga Bar from scratch to a 500 crore business today. Along this journey, she's learned a few lessons, and nobody can talk about these with as much conviction as she does. All the way from why pricing mistakes can kill your brand faster than anything else, or how to raise VC when you're building a new category, or how do you bootstrap. I think this episode fully covers all the early stage mistakes that you as a consumer brand entrepreneur are likely to make when you're starting out. This is one of the most honest deep dives into consumer brands. Suhasini, the founder and CEO of Yoga Bars, is here with us.
Thanks, Abhinav, for having me.
So Suhasini, I want to ask you, there are a lot of businesses which are, VC's favorites, wherein they play in a winner take all market, like a marketplace, like anything consumer tech, I would say. But
Yeah.
consumer brands, there is the possibility that everyone can eat. Sure, you may eat a bigger slice or a smaller slice, but you won't die hungry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think Wadhwani Foundation looks at mass entrepreneurship in the sense that how many entrepreneurs can we create, and there are certain sectors that support a lot of entrepreneurs playing within. So consumer brands happen to be one of those, and which is why I think this session sort of makes more sense. I want to start with the fact, and you're mostly talking to somebody who's in their early 20s and looking to start up. I want to ask you, when you started up, did you know all of this? Did you deliberately choose to be in this sector? What were you thinking?
See, nobody knows everything when you start, right? It is a leap of
Right.
faith as much as it is, and you figure things out along the way. I definitely chose to work in a sector I was passionate about. I've always eaten a certain kind of food. I have a certain simplicity in the way I approach my meals, and I did feel that the snacking space in India, there weren't healthy alternatives at all. So while the business was born out of my own desire or my own, so the way bars started was my mother used to make me bars after I saw it in the US. And then, you share it and then you kind of give it out in your yoga class and then you realize that everybody has the same pain point. So while the business was born out of my own need, it isn't necessary that all businesses need to be born out of your own need. And no, I don't think prior experience is needed because neither me nor my sister had any kind of prior experience while doing yoga bar.
Got it. You said you sort of gave out yoga bars in yoga classes, and I've also heard stories of you handing out them in place of Diwali sweets to your friends and folks around. Was that your product validation? Did you know that okay, this could be that big a market? Because again, you guys are category creators. There didn't sort of exist any yoga bar equivalent before you guys came in.
I think, see, if you sit down to actually do the market dynamics, market validation, size of market, I probably would have never started because the TAM was zero at literally the point where I started, right? I do think positive reinforcement and positive feedback on the product built a little bit more conviction. So in your journey of entrepreneurship, what you should look is for positive reaffirmations. Even I don't think a lot of businesses, especially category creators, will ever be able to sit down and objectively say, I'm building for this market size, I'm going to take this much share, all of that. I think they're born out of your heart and they're born out of the everyday rigor of running a business. I think you figure things along the way, and I think a couple of positive reaffirmations kind of push you along that journey.
Define positive reaffirmations and tell me, how do you pick between delusion or positive reaffirmation? Because you could
I
be
think
deluded as
actually,
well.
yeah, I think delusion is actually a very good quality for an entrepreneur because otherwise it's difficult to sustain on an everyday basis. If you're too much of a realist and you're too much of an overthinker, it's difficult to not for reality to not hit you, right? And the reality when you start a business is there is 99% chance of failure. There is the fact that you have wasted prime years of your life doing nothing, and things amounting to nothing, and a lot of your personal life takes a hit. These are the three realities of doing any business, right? But positive reaffirmations are like when somebody sends you, oh my God, this product is great. If this was available at a store, I would be like buying hordes of it. And then you kind of build for that one consumer, and then you build for a couple of more consumers who give you that kind of feedback. And you think in your head that 1% of India is going to turn out exactly like that. People who are going to love your product and buy it month after month after month.
You know, when you uncover a new market, sure, the initial days are hard, and eventually there is sure, back in the day it would have been hard to raise VC. Today it's sort of easier. You can show some traction, you can show a new market, you can build a narrative, and get investors in. Did you have investors when you were beginning, or did you spend a few years without investors?
We spent a large number of years without an investor. Almost the first 3 years was just run with angel money, and our own personal funds, right?
How much was that?
I think about 2.5 crores in the first 3 years is what we ended up raising. I do think category creators don't get as much credit. I do think VCs are a lot more easier on people who come in later than they are on people who initially create category. And maybe rightly so. I don't know, because it takes a lot of money to actually build category. Um, but yeah, I mean, in retrospect, I do think we would have had similar outcomes even if we did yoga bar over a longer period of time and just kind of set it up to not require VC money. I think both parts are equally legit parts of working.
You're saying that you could have completely bootstrapped it with zero funding, maybe let's say a few angels with a couple of crores, and you could have reached a similar outcome today.
Not today, but I could have reached a similar outcome 10 years later with a large portion of the cap table.
So money saves you time.
Money saves you time, yeah.
Okay, let's say you're talking to a 20-year-old. Define what the playbook would look like if you were to bootstrap a consumer brand today.
If I were to bootstrap Yoga Bar today, I would work with government grants, work with government loans. I would choose certain channels of distribution that do not bleed money. I would maybe not have started as a GT heavy business. I would have had a very high gross margin in my
Can you
business.
dive? Can you break these terms for me? GT. What does GT mean?
GT means general trade, like means it's a neighborhood kirana store.
Okay.
I would not choose that because then you need to have a very strong field force to kind of run the entire GT sales, right? So I would go be an online first brand. I would have higher gross margins, and I would run a really tight ship. And I think that's perfectly possible.
So you're saying you wouldn't go offline first, you would instead
Yeah,
be an online brand. But
yeah.
don't people in consumer brands say that, hey, offline is our most profitable channel?
Of course it is, but it requires a certain kind of front ending of investment. And if you haven't raised the capital, you won't be able to front end a very large sales team to kind of manage that workforce.
Interesting. And tell me about gross margins. What are the gross margins in various sectors that you look at?
I think in personal care, it's roughly 60 to 70%.
Okay.
In food, it's about anywhere between 35 to 45%.
Right. Can we sort of also unpack what gross margins mean? If I put in $100, if I sell a product for $100, if the gross margin is 60%, am I getting 60 rupees as profit, or are there added costs? Usually, how do you work out these economics to bootstrap?
I think gross margin is basically on the price at which your customer buys minus how much it took you to make the product. In layman terms, that's exactly what is gross margin. How
Okay.
much is a consumer willing to pay for a certain product, and how much did it cost you to make that product?
Eventually, but what comes in hand is a lot lesser, right? So what sort of happens there? What are the other costs that get added there?
You have distribution costs, of course, like depending upon the channel in which you distribute. So you have retailer margins roughly between 30%. You have distributor margins of 8%. And you have the taxes, you have GST of 18%. But net of distribution costs, how much you realize for a product that you sold minus the cost of making it is your gross margin.
So in beauty and personal care, if you're selling a product for 100 rupees, you can get 60 rupees at scale.
70.
And in food, it's probably the half.
I said, yeah, 35 to 40.
And what are some of the most profitable industries here? Beauty and personal care is probably right at top. What others do you look at if somebody was to build a profitable business?
Clothing is pretty high gross margin as well, but inventory management becomes very critical.
What does it look like in clothing, the margins?
Anywhere between 60 to 70, similar to personal care.
Awesome. If somebody's starting up today, apart from choosing the idea and validating it, how do you get a team and get the initial customers when you're starting out bootstrapped?
See, in terms of a team, like if you have a trusted circle or you have a circle from your ex employer, people who you think are really good, getting people you know and trust is quite critical for your first set of employees. I was, of course, working with my sister and we had very complementary skills. So we solved for senior level hires by actually running the business as two members of a family, right? And in the initial days, my aunt used to help out in some things, and my mom used to help in some things, and stuff like that. So having a trusted circle when you start is very, very critical. Other than your close circle, you also have to pay people market price. Like you get, I mean, it's not like a person refuses, like the normal cycle of recruiting somebody applies to you. Like people are not going to join you purely because they like what you're building. They're going to join you if you can promise them a long term career, which is stable, which will kind of, help them to grow a certain career path and will have steep learning curves. And I think steep learning curves are very, very relevant to people who join a startup. And your first set of customers cannot be influenced. You will have to take an objective assessment of whether people truly like your product and are coming back to you. If you don't make an objective assessment and you influence the sale, you will never truly know if you have a long term business that is worth building or not.
There is no respite in the kind of salaries that you can offer your initial talent by offering them little bit of stake in the business. Are you not a believer in that?
I do think you can, but I think you need to do that after you have a slightly more. It depends on the kind of business you're building. Again, in tech, it's very, very common because you need very, very specific talent pool. When you build a consumer business, you could give your sales team like those kind of incentives, but you'll probably get one sales guy. Most of your other people will be very, very junior people who will value money much more than they will value stock. You
What did
have
you
to remunerate based on what the counter person thinks as valuable. You can't remunerate based on what you think is valuable.
If you're paying good salaries, market rate salaries, when you're on a shoestring budget, what
You
happens to
hire
found?
very junior people, Abhinav. A lot of the work in the first 2 years has to be done by the founders. You're not going to understand the business if you're not going to be hiring senior talent.
Got it. Any hiring mistakes you can talk about?
I think sometimes hiring because people have a particular brand name doesn't always work out. I think that the initial hires that we did, which was more based on culture alignment and work ethic and an attitude to learn has worked far, far better for us. I think when you hire just because somebody comes from a certain institute or, like when from a certain company or and will bring a certain skill set is not the way to hire. I think truly understanding what drives people has always worked out better for us.
And how do you think about what kind of an organization you want to build? Does it happen to be an extension of your personal values because you're at the helm?
Yes, absolutely yes. I mean, blanket yes.
What does that mean? What does that mean for Yoga Bar? What does that mean for you? What is your
I
personal
think
values
we
that
are
you've brought into culture?
I think we are very outcome oriented company. I think outcomes matter to us more than anything else. I think we put the customer at the center of everything. We are a very, very value driven organization. That means things have to be made so as to give maximum value to a customer. That's how I operate. That's how my buying pattern operates, and that's how we translate how customer buying patterns will translate. And the non-negotiable on values relating to the speaking the truth or trust. We can't operate in a trust deficit environment, so we're a very frank organization. If we need to understand something, we ask honest questions and we don't bullshit in a way. Like we're just not bullshitters. Like I can't and that translates to the value system of Yoga Bar as a brand. We're not marketers. We don't bullshit. Like we say things for what they are. And yeah.
And that has to be that's a cultural input, which
Yeah.
eventually shows in the
I
brand.
do think organizations are extension of founder personalities.
Right. And how about brand? Does brand also happen to be an extension of the founder, or Can
I
you?
do think so. At least in the case of Yoga Bar, it is. We've always promoted a certain kind of vibe in terms of promoting for people to live happy lives. And I do think that comes out in the way the brand talks, in the kind of imagery of the brand, in the kind of communication that we put out to consumers. So I do think even the brands that we build end up being extensions of ourselves.
There are certain, like you say, Yoga Bar is a happy brand, and we sort of vouch for people to live happy life. Today with internet, and you have so many testing tools, you can check what content performs well, what doesn't, what ad clicks, what doesn't. You can also figure out certain emotions that work better than the rest. A fear or a shock, as an emotion, or something controversial, or something of these sorts would always work better. Something that exposes something would always work better. Thoughts on that? Because it's not like brands haven't been built this way. When you see a lot of pop colors popping up in Instagram, there have been brands that have sort of put out that persona because it gets clicked on, it's Instagram worthy.
I think if you're selling an insurance product, it absolutely works to build fear. I don't think brands in the long term, especially consumer brands, they don't leave the best connotation by building brands out of fear. It might work in the short term. In the long term, building positive reinforcement always takes the brand longer.
But aren't we seeing a bunch of brands who are out there and exposing, like a skincare brand or a personal care brand, telling you that okay, all of this stuff has chemicals and it's unsafe, it's toxic, etc. Whereas my lotion or my cream or my soap or whatever is the purest, and that becomes their go-to market.
I think what I have to say about that is again goes to founder personality. I think if instilling fear comes naturally to you, maybe that is your go-to, and maybe it works in the short term.
Right.
You might need to put a lot of money behind it,
Okay.
but
Why do you say that? Why do you say that? Why does fear need money?
because you need to. I mean, because by virtue of relying on negative versus positive, you need
Hmm.
to when you say positive things, you're likely for people to talk about it to other people much more, but when you say negative things, you need to convince people repeatedly. If you just say something's healthy for you and you're the first person to say that this is healthy plus tasty or whatever, you're likely to convert a consumer the first time you say it.
Hmm.
But if you have to say something's bad and then say something is good and then say why mine is good, you
Hmm.
need repeated messaging, and you need continuous messaging, and you need to be. Fear mongering is expensive. I don't think it's a cheap affair at all.
Tell me one thing: how you've been on ground with a new brand, how do people really receive a new brand? How do distributors receive a new brand? How are these conversations sort of had? Do you have any stories around that?
I think when we initially started Yoga Bar Abhinav, like a lot of retailers and distributors, at that point, health wasn't even a thing, right? So a lot of people would say, India mein health kahan bikta hai, taste hi bikta hai, and all of that. But you kind of get the distributors to try our products for their families, etc. You make the distributor your customer, and after that point, it becomes easy.
Let's say you were, coming back to the first question that I asked you, you said that if you were to bootstrap today, you would be an online first brand. What sort of the channel mix that you would take? Would you go, set up a
Commerce
Shopify?
first, quick
Okay.
commerce first to Shopify, D2C.
Amazon, Flipkart.
See, Amazon and Flipkart probably in the next stage, because I do think consumers, it's important, because if it depends on the kind of brand that you're building. So if you're building for the top of the funnel, those consumers have already pivoted from Amazon to quick commerce.
What is top of the funnel?
Top of the funnel are people who are willing to pay money to substitute time.
Got it. So top of the creamy layer, top 1% of India,
Yes,
let's say.
exactly.
And quick commerce is also less crowded.
Yeah, because there are a limited number of brands. Yes.
What about Shopify?
Yeah, I mean that should always be used as a feedback channel and also as a marketing channel for what it is that you want your brand to showcase.
So okay, there's a lot of gyan that goes on LinkedIn about this is what consumer brands should do. There's also Shark Tank today that's motivating a lot of people to start consumer brands. Where do these guys go wrong when they're starting bootstrapped? Is there a very commonly Is there a very common or obvious pitfall where you see a lot of brands going wrong with in the beginning?
I think if you don't fundamentally establish making profit with every sale, you
Hmm.
could go really wrong.
Okay, and what makes people not do that? Like it
In
sounds
the
very obvious.
earnest, no, it does. It's not actually, because in the earnestness of showing revenue,
Huh.
in the in the ability of saying that I can increase price later,
Hmm.
people always end up launching at much lower prices, and sometimes not even having the discipline of putting down how much are you making, right? I think all of that, like not having a finance person onboarded if you don't understand finance, can
Hmm.
really hurt your business.
And is that not the right way? That okay, I launch at a 50% discount and then slowly rake up prices. Does that not work? Because that's been the strategy. That's the most obvious strategy.
You can do it when you're doing brand extensions. You can't do it on the day that you're starting your brand. You have to establish what your brand stands for, and that cannot be discounted price.
And brand extension means
Like, for example, you might do it as a new introduction of a pre existing brand. Like a limited period try me discount is very different from establishing that that's the price at which you will perennially sell.
in consumer brand there is it's just not possible. It's just not advised to start at a discount. You should just be like, okay, I'm 9.99, pay 9.99, or you're not my customer.
Exactly. Exactly. If you don't establish who you stand for and what is your brand, it's very difficult to come back from that point.
Awesome. Cool. So, I think, I want to open the floor to some of the questions for the audience. Okay. Have you ever faced customer rejections on or poor ratings on any of your SKUs? How should startups tackle customer
Um,
reviews?
I think you need to first make sure that the customer review that's happening is genuine or not. Because I can give you a live example. A couple of days back, we launched the Yoga Bar Whey Protein. We
Right.
hadn't even shipped a single unit, and we had three negative reviews. So we didn't know whose action that was, right? If you have a genuine customer negative review, I
Hmm.
would call up the customer and understand the experience, and then kind of rectify. You can win a customer over by saying you did something about that negative review that you got. So, two things: first, establish whether it's a genuine review or not. If it is genuine, you'll have to convince the consumer why, what you have done about it. Like, it's a very, very big part of
Hmm.
making sure that you have a compelling proposition and your product is actually good.
Got it. And if there's a bad experience, own it, and then
Absolutely own it.
show steps for how you're fixing it. Keep them posted. Cool. Was there a big customer, and how did you land your first big customer? Who would that be in your case?
In our case, it was Indigo.
Okay.
And Indigo wanted to get some bars for their crew.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, they contacted us, and that was the first big order. And that sustained the business when we weren't funded because it was actually profitable.
Right. And how big a deal was that?
It was roughly, I think, about 20 lakhs a month or something. It was very, very significant.
And how did you get them?
By reaching out through LinkedIn, actually. You should not be afraid to ask when you set up a business. You should be comfortable with asking, and you have to be comfortable with being refused.
And how young were you guys back then?
Young as a company, okay.
Yeah,
I think it
yeah.
was year one, I think.
Wow. So you were bootstrapped completely,
Completely
and
bootstrap at that point.
Indigo took a bet.
Indigo took up it.
Very nice. Okay. Next is, how long did it take Yoga Bar to get funding and scale? I think you guys raised the first funding after 3 years.
Yeah, 2.5 maybe, like 2.5 years is what I remember. We did use a lot of, all of my savings, and we did raise some angel funding from like a couple of friends, but that's how we ran for the first 2 years.
So friends and family until 3 years, and third year you did a proper VC round. Was it a VC round?
It was a VC round from one of the angels. So Kamal's fund was Fireside,
Right.
and Kamal was an angel investor.
Right. How much was that?
The first was not much. I think it was 4 CR.
Until date, how much have you raised?
Excluding ITC as pure play venture capital, I think about 60 crores.
And what did that funding get you to a revenue of?
Around 100 crore business.
Very nice. Okay, what are some of the compliances to follow, like FSSAI and other things? And did you start with the contract manufacturing, or did you
No.
start making the product by yourself?
Yeah. I'm not going to answer compliance questions. I think you'll need to do a deep dive and look at all the regulations. Like I've emphasized just one regulation. You have legal metrology, you have like 100 different regulations, and you need to get a good agency to manage your legal matters. But we didn't start with contract manufacturing. We actually set up our own factory.
That must have cost a lot. That's not the easy way to
No,
start.
I mean, we initially started with a 15 lakh factory with a chicky machine, a sheeting, cutting, and packaging machine, and then moved on.
But you had to do that because your product was new to the market. Not every other brand has to do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, I don't know. It depends upon what you want to build and what moats you want to build on your product.
right. You and your sister Anindita transitioned from corporate careers in the US. What made you guys do this?
Corporate careers are quite boring. If you have an inherent desire to learn, I think entrepreneurship really challenges you. I think at that point of time, that was our thought process. I also think having the security of knowing that your parents will provide for you, in the sense, my mom's house was there, and I would get the meals that I
Mm-hmm.
needed. Mom's a
Mm-hmm.
great cook. That helped
Mm-hmm.
make the decision.
How much does it help to have a family configuration like this, wherein that's supportive, they are advocates for you
Means
taking risk?
means everything. It means everything. Why? Because entrepreneurship is also a hard journey. You might as well have your personal life really sorted. It's not difficult. It's very difficult to have if you don't have a support system.
Right, you can't do it without people
You
supporting
can
you.
still do it. I'm just saying it's a lot more painful.
It's a privilege that really sort of gives you a.
Absolute privilege. Absolute privilege. Yeah.
Okay, very nice. All right, I'll take one last question. uh, Anytime distributors ask for more margins because you're a new brand?
Oh, they do. They do.
Hmm.
And you have to pay more margin than the market. Also because they need to make as much money, and your products don't have as much throughput. A distributor makes money based on number of units sold multiplied by the margin. And since your number of units sold is so less, because it's a new, you have to compensate with higher margins.
So there's no way that you can negotiate.
So yeah, you can't.
They're justified in their ask.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Last test, final question. I'm just going to rephrase it. It just popped up from Swaroop. Swaroop's asking, I want to launch a luxury beverage brand, uh, probably a zero calorie drink. What would be the right approach to position it today? This is just like a hypothetical to you. So ask me to end this.
Um, I would position it as the zero calorie drink. Or
Okay.
did he say zero calorie?
Zero
I,
calorie and luxury beverage brand.
um, I would use, I mean, the only zero calorie beverage in the world is water. So I would draw some parallel with water and have creatives that look like water, but luxury and water. So that would be the way I would think about it.
You don't think of Diet Coke as a zero calorie beverage?
Not at all, actually,
Why?
because it's tremendously harmful. I think of, I mean, it might be a zero calorie beverage. It might be a zero sugar beverage. It's definitely not a zero calorie beverage.
Seriously?
The only
I mean,
zero calorie beverage is actually water.
it does say 0.33 or something
Yeah,
at
so
the
it's not
at the.
zero. I'm saying it's not zero.
Okay, cool. The time's up. Thank you so much, Suhasini. This was
Thank you,
good.
Abhinav, for having
Thank
me.
you for
Thank
taking time
you.
on a busy Friday afternoon for yourself in the middle of a very tough year, like you said to me. Thanks again. This was great.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
See you.